My daughter told me she forgot my birthday. She said it calmly, as if forgetting me were an administrative error. When I tried to explain why it hurt, she sighed and said, "Stop overreacting." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. A few weeks later, after seeing yet another pattern of neglect on my birthday, I sat in a quiet office and revised my will, choosing to align it with the reality of how I was treated. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Chains channel team, based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. My name is Eleanor Whitcomb. I am 66. I have never liked big celebrations. Birthdays, to me, are not about candles or noise. They are about presence. Someone showing up, someone remembering without being reminded twice. This year, I mentioned my birthday the way I always do, lightly, almost apologetically. I said it in passing, over the phone, while my daughter talked about her week. I told her I would be home all day if she wanted to stop by. Just dinner, nothing special. She paused, then said, "I'll try." I told myself that was enough. I did not plan a party. I did not invite anyone. I bought a small cake from the grocery store, the kind with simple white icing, because that felt appropriate. I set one extra place at the table without thinking about it. The day came and went quietly. The phone stayed still. When it finally rang that evening, her voice sounded distracted. She explained she had forgotten. Her mother-in-law needed her. It had been a long day. She spoke as if time were something that had simply slipped away. I listened. I said very little. And when she told me not to make it into something bigger than it was, I felt a familiar tightening settle in my chest. The kind that meant this was not new and that it would not end here. Her message came late, after the light outside my kitchen window had already softened into evening. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I forgot." I read it once, then again. I typed back before I could talk myself out of it. "You forgot my birthday." There was a pause before the reply, long enough to seem deliberate. When the phone finally buzzed, her words confirmed it. She had chosen how to respond. "It's been a day," she wrote. Things got complicated. I waited, giving her space to explain. She didn't disappoint. My mother-in-law needed help. Something came up. You know how she is. I set the phone down, then picked it up again. "You said you'd try." I typed, "I stayed home." She called this time. Her voice was tight, already defensive. "I didn't do this on purpose," she said. "You're acting like I chose not to come." "You did choose," I said. "You chose her company over celebrating with me." She exhaled sharply. "That's not fair. She actually needed me, and I didn't." There was a beat of silence. When she spoke again, her tone shifted lower, firmer, the one she used when she wanted the conversation to end. "Mom, stop overreacting." The words landed exactly where they always had. Clean, efficient, final. "I'm not yelling," I said. "I'm just telling you how it felt." "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," she replied. "We can do dinner another time, another time." The phrase slid neatly into place beside all the other times that had never come. I didn't argue. I didn't remind her how old I was, or how rarely I asked for anything. I let the silence stretch until she filled it. "I really have to go," she said. "She's waiting on me." After the call ended, I sat at the table and looked at the untouched slice of cake. What stayed with me wasn't that she forgot. It was how easily she explained why she had somewhere better to be. After we hung up, I kept thinking the feeling would pass. It didn't. It settled, the way it always did when something old resurfaced and refused to stay buried. The first time it happened, I was in the hospital for 2 nights after a minor procedure. Nothing dramatic. I told her not to rush. She said she'd come after work. She didn't. The next morning, she texted, "I fell asleep early. You're fine, right?" When I said it would have helped to see her, she replied, "Mom, don't make this a thing." A year later, I finished a certification I'd worked on for months. It wasn't a graduation with caps or speeches, just a small ceremony at the community center. I mentioned it weeks in advance. She said she'd try. The day came, and she sent a picture instead, her and her mother-in-law at lunch. "We ran long," she wrote. When I told her I'd saved her a seat, she said, "You didn't really need me there." Those words stayed with me. Need. As if being present were a favor, not a choice. There were other moments. A Sunday dinner I cooked and kept warm while the clock ticked. A winter evening when I asked for help moving a chair upstairs and heard, "I can't tonight." Each time, the explanation changed, but the ending didn't. Whenever I tried to name how it felt, she used the same tone, calm, patient, final. "You're reading too much into this. You always take things personally. Stop overreacting." I learned how to respond in ways that kept the peace. I laughed things off. I told friends she was busy. I told myself she loved me in her own way. I said it enough times that it almost sounded true. But after my birthday, the memories lined up without effort, not like accusations, like evidence. It wasn't that she forgot once. It was that she forgot me whenever remembering required choosing me over someone else. By the time I went to bed that night, I understood something I'd avoided for years. Patterns don't announce themselves. They reveal who people are by how consistently they repeat. I didn't need to imagine where she went instead of coming to see me. She told me often enough, "She needs me right now." My daughter would say, voice tight with urgency, "If I don't help, she takes it personally." I learned her mother-in-law's name through repetition, not introduction. It was always attached to a problem, a dinner that had to be perfect, a favor that couldn't wait, a feeling that had to be managed. She gets upset easily. My daughter once said, half whispering, like the woman could hear her through the phone, "You know how she is." I did know. I knew because my daughter showed up every time she was called. I saw it in the way she rearranged her schedule, in the way her tone softened when she spoke about her, careful not to sound dismissive. When her mother-in-law asked, my daughter didn't hesitate. She adjusted. When I asked, she negotiated. "I'll try," she'd say. If nothing comes up, something always did. I remember one afternoon when she stopped by briefly, phone buzzing in her hand the entire time. She kept glancing at the screen. "I shouldn't stay long," she said. "She's expecting me." "I thought you were free today." I said, "I was," she replied. But this came up. That was the difference. With me, things could wait. With her, they couldn't. "You're easier," she told me. "With you, I can decide the timing. With her, I can't risk upsetting her." "You're easier," she told me. "You understand." She doesn't. I nodded at the time. I told myself that meant I'd raised her to be confident, to trust my love wouldn't disappear if she disappointed me. But standing in my quiet house after my birthday, I heard that sentence again, stripped of its kindness. Being easy had made me invisible. Being understanding had made me optional. And she had learned, without ever saying it out loud, that choosing me was the one choice she could always undo without consequence. I ate dinner alone that night. I didn't make much something warm, something easy. I set 2 places out of habit, then left them that way, like proof I hadn't imagined the day. My phone buzzed while I was clearing the dishes. A photo loaded slowly, then sharpened. A long table at a brunch she attended instead. Smiling faces. My daughter stood near the center, leaning in, her arm around her mother-in-law's shoulder. clearly prioritizing that gathering over visiting me. She looked relaxed, present, the kind of smile you don't fake. The caption read, "Nothing matters more than family." I stared at it longer than I meant to. I enlarged the image with my fingers, catching details I didn't need. The glasses on the table, the way my daughter's hair was tucked behind her ear, the same way I used to do it for her when she was a child. I noticed how close she stood, how natural it looked. She called a few minutes later, "Cheerful now. I hope you're not upset," she said quickly. It just turned into a whole thing. I saw the pictures. I said. There was a pause. "Oh, yeah." She wanted to document the night. "You know how she is. You looked happy," I said. "Well," she replied, a small laugh slipping through. "It was a nice evening. I let that sit between us. I told you we'd celebrate another time." She added, "This doesn't mean I don't care." I didn't answer right away. I thought about the empty chair across from me, about how full that table looked. "You didn't forget how to show up," I said finally. "You just showed up somewhere else." She sighed, irritation edging into her voice. "Mom, you're reading way too much into this." After we hung up, I scrolled back to the photo once more. The word family sat under it like a declaration. Clear, confident, public. I turned my phone face down and stayed at the table a while longer, letting the silence settle into something solid. Not confusion, not doubt. Clarity. She brought it up the following week. The way people do when they think something belongs to them already. "I was thinking," my daughter said over the phone. "Casual, distracted. When you're ready to slow down, the house might be too much for you." I said nothing at first. "It's a lot of upkeep," she continued. "The stairs, the yard, you know, eventually. The word hung there, polite and heavy, signaling her assumption that control over the house would pass smoothly into her hands. "I'm not planning on going anywhere." I said. "I know," she replied quickly. "I just mean later. It would make sense for us to handle it when the time comes. Us. Not me. Not we'll talk about it. Handle it." She spoke like someone organizing boxes in a room that wasn't hers. "You've always said you wanted the house to stay in the family," she added. "It would be easier if we didn't complicate things." I pictured her standing in that kitchen, phone tucked between her shoulder and ear, already moving on to the next thought. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't mention my birthday. She didn't apologize. The conversation wasn't about me. It was about logistics. "What do you mean by handle it?" I asked. "Well," she said, as if explaining something obvious. "We could start planning now, paperwork, that kind of thing." I waited for her to soften it. She didn't. "You're talking about my will," I said. There was a small laugh. "Not like that. I just don't want things to get messy later, messy. As if my life were a drawer that needed sorting." "And what happens to me in this plan?" I asked. She hesitated. "Of course you'd be taken care of, passive, vague." I realized then that she had already decided what my future looked like. She'd pictured the house with her things in it, her routines, her rules. My presence reduced to a condition that would eventually clear. She wasn't cruel. That was the strangest part. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was speaking from a place of certainty, the kind that comes when you've never had to earn what you expect to receive. "I've always been here," I said quietly. "You haven't." Her tone sharpened. "That's not fair." "It's accurate," I replied. Silence followed. Not the thoughtful kind. The offended kind. "I don't see why this has to turn into a problem," she said. "I'm your daughter." She said it like a title, like proof. After we hung up, I sat with the truth she hadn't meant to reveal. She didn't feel responsible for my loneliness. She felt entitled to my legacy. That night, I couldn't distract myself the way I usually did. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't call a friend. I sat with the quiet and let it stay. I replayed the conversations in my head, not just the last one, but all of them. Every time I'd said, she's just busy. Every time I'd laughed something off to keep things light. Every time I'd chosen calm over honesty because I thought that was what a good mother did. I remembered the first time I defended her to someone else. A neighbor had asked why my daughter hadn't come by when I was sick. I said, she has a lot going on. The words came out easily. They always did. I'd said them to myself, too. She doesn't mean it. She'll show up next time. She loves me. She just struggles with priorities. I'd wrap those sentences around every disappointment until they felt like truth instead of cover. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, a pause between thoughts, a tightening in my chest when I admitted something I'd avoided naming. I hadn't just tolerated the pattern, I'd protected it. By staying quiet, I'd made it easier for her to believe nothing was wrong. By accepting excuses, I'd taught her that my feelings were flexible, optional, that I would always adjust. I thought about how quickly she'd said, "Stop overreacting," how familiar the phrase sounded. It had worked because I'd let it work. I'd back down every time, afraid that pushing would cost me whatever connection we still had. But sitting there, I understood something I hadn't before. The cost had already been paid. I'd just been the one paying it. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I felt tired, but clear. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop hoping someone will suddenly become who they've never shown themselves to be. I looked around the room and noticed how much of my life was shaped by anticipation. Waiting, leaving space, holding things open in case she decided to step in. I thought about the house, about the way she spoke of it like a future she could claim without showing up for the present. I thought about the silence I'd maintained in the name of peace. That was when I understood what my silence had been teaching her. Not patience, not grace. It had been teaching her that my hurt didn't count unless I made it inconvenient. And for the first time, I decided I wouldn't do that anymore. I didn't make the decision in anger. I waited until the pattern became undeniable after my birthday, and my thoughts stopped circling and began to line up. The attorney's office was quiet in the way professional spaces are quiet. Nothing to react to. Nothing to push against. He introduced himself simply and asked how he could help. When I told him I wanted to review my will, he nodded like it was the most ordinary request in the world. "Has something changed?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I have." He didn't press. He slid a legal pad closer and let me speak at my own pace. I told him what mattered to me now, not in a list, not as demands, as values. I said I wanted my estate to reflect presence, responsibility, and care. I said I didn't want to reward distance just because it shared my last name. He looked up then. "We can do that," he said, "but I want to be clear. This needs to be intentional." "It is," I replied. "That's why I'm here." We went through the document line by line. He explained consequences without dramatizing them. I asked questions. I listened. When he mentioned my daughter's share, he paused. "Waiting. I want that removed," I said. He didn't flinch. "All right." We discussed alternatives. A local community fund I'd volunteered with for years, a neighbor who had checked on me after surgeries without being asked, a small scholarship for adult students restarting their education, places where showing up was not assumed, but practiced. "This isn't about punishment," I said, more to myself than to him. "It's about alignment." He wrote that down. When he asked if I wanted to leave a letter explaining my choice, I shook my head. "If I explain, she'll argue or manipulate." I said, "I don't want that." He respected that. The papers were prepared carefully. No rush, no dramatic language. Just clarity. As I signed, I felt something shift, not relief, exactly, but steadiness. The kind that comes when your actions finally match what you've known for a long time. walking out. I understood why this felt different from every other decision I'd made for my daughter. This one didn't ask her to change. It asked me to stop pretending that silence was kindness. What I left behind in that office wasn't love. It was entitlement, and what I carried with me was a boundary I could finally stand inside without shrinking. Chapter 9, the reaction that answered everything. She called 3 days later, not to ask how I was, not to mention my birthday. Her voice was sharp before I finished saying hello. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. "Tell you what," I replied. "The will." She said, "I had to hear it from someone else." I stayed quiet. "You had no right," she continued. "That house was always supposed to come to me." "Supposed to?" I said evenly, "Yes." She snapped. "I'm your daughter." I waited. The apology never came. "You've embarrassed me," she went on. "Our family, friends, and neighbors are asking questions. Do you know how this makes me look?" "I do," I said. Her breath caught. "So you're cutting me off over one mistake I didn't argue. I didn't explain the years. I didn't mention the birthday she said she forgot. This isn't punishment." I said, "It's responsibility." She laughed once, brittle. "I have a life. I can't drop everything." "I know," I said. "You never have." Silence followed. "I can't believe you do this to me," she said finally. She didn't say she missed me. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say my name the way she used to when she wanted comfort. When the call ended, I didn't feel shaken. I felt answered. Life didn't become louder after that. It became quieter. My daughter and I spoke less. When we did, the conversation stayed on the surface. Weather, schedules, polite updates that didn't ask anything of either of us. She never mentioned the will again. I never brought up my birthday. Distance settled in. Not as punishment, but as fact. A friend asked once, "Are you okay with how things turned out?" "I am," I said, and meant it. What changed wasn't my family structure. It was my posture inside it. I stopped waiting for calls that didn't come. I stopped rearranging my days in case she decided to show up. I made plans that didn't include hope as a condition. When I ran into my daughter at a family event months later, she hugged me quickly. "You look well," she said. "I am," I replied, and I was. Not because things had been repaired, but because I'd stopped handing pieces of myself to someone who treated them as optional. There's a lesson in that. One I learned later than I should have. Love doesn't mean endless access. Family doesn't mean immunity from consequence. Respect is built through presence, not promises. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about boundaries, dignity, and quiet strength. I didn't walk away to be dramatic. I walked away because staying had been teaching the wrong lesson for far too long.